Welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm very excited to introduce you to Karen White, a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 31, that's 3-1, books, including the Trad Street series, Last Night in London, and Dreams of Falling. Her latest book is the first in a spin-off series set in New Orleans. The Shop on Royal Street will be available wherever books are sold on Tuesday, March 29th. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Karen.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And I always ask my first question of everybody is always general, but it is, where does your story begin? And particularly your story as an author begin. Where does that story begin, Karen?
As an avid reader, and I was late coming to reading. I was not I did not become a reader until I was 9 years old, third grade. My mother was not a reader. She read her Ladies' Home Journal, and my dad was a voracious reader, but always Winston Churchill's memoirs, and except for true ghost stories. My dad would read those out aloud to us, which meant that I really didn't sleep alone until I went to college. But which also informs my later writing career. But when I was in third grade, my father was with Exxon, so we lived in all sorts of different locations, and we were in Venezuela, and we sort of lived in this encampment, and we had this club area where we did everything. Our school, everything was there, and there was a tiny little library, and I was just getting in from the heat into the air conditioning with a friend of mine who was returning school books or library books. And I was just standing there just waiting for her to be done so we could go swimming. And the librarian walked over to me and said, "Karen, what do you read?" And I said, "I don't." And she turned completely gray. And she just immediately turned towards the shelves and pulled out a book. And it was The Secret in the Old Clock, Nancy Drew. And that was all it took.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So were you turning to reading as an escape from?
Oh yeah, I was raised with three brothers. Of course, I was turning to reading as an escape. They weren't readers. They tortured me. And like I said, in Venezuela, there were some really big insects and reptiles, and they loved, putting them down my back, putting them in my bed, putting them in my shoes, putting them over, on my bike seat, putting them over the doors. Of course, I hid from them with a book because otherwise. It was a scary childhood.
Well, that combined with the ghost stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, I needed to escape from my little world. So, yeah.
What was up with the ghost stories? What was your father's fascination? You said they're true ghost stories?
Yeah, my dad comes from a long line of Southerners, from early 1800s, late 1700s. They've been in the South, and, Southerners, they don't like to let their family members really depart. And I guess he grew up, because I remember as a child, his mother, my grandmother, telling me, yes, I was hanging clothes on the line in the backyard, and my, mother was talking to me. And, I just thought that was normal, that people would talk to people. Luckily, they didn't speak to me because I'm a scaredy cat. But my dad, I think that also, he was born in a log cabin, literally no facilities or whatever. It was 1932 in Macomb, Mississippi, if you can imagine. It's the Depression, very, very hard times. And so, talking was all they had for entertainment, and they lived with lots of relatives around them. And so everybody's always talking about the relatives. It was the storytelling. And my dad said that cabin, had been in their family. I don't know for how long. There's pictures of my great parents in front of this cabin. So there's a lot of history there. And he said he had a dog that there was one room that dog would just bare its fangs and just never go into. And there was a rocking chair that was in it, that had belonged to his grandmother that would occasionally be rocking. So, these are the stories that as a child, they don't leave you.
They don't leave you, but they kind of simulate the imagination, don't they?
Oh,
it's like that what if gene that lives inside, most authors. It's like fertilizer for that.
Absolutely. And even, even though I could not sleep by myself for many years, I'm so grateful for those germs and, of a story and the watering, that my father's stories sort of gave those seeds. So Yeah.
If you had to fast forward a little bit, and I do want to spend a little bit more time talking about your childhood, but I'm curious, like, how did those experiences with your dad and his sort of true ghost stories, how did that impact your later writing?
Oh, that, and also his fascination with history, because I think part of his fascination with ghosts was history, not just his personal history of his family, but our collective history. I mean, also, he was a huge fan of Winston Churchill, as I am. He read every memoir, every speech, and he passed that on to me. And growing up, all over the world, and also we were in New Jersey. We've been to every single battlefield for every battle within, when he worked in New York City, we would drive from where we lived in New Jersey down to Mississippi and Florida to visit family. And we'd stop at every battlefield along the way, detouring just to go over the history and everything, because ghosts are history. They're people who lived before us, who their stories were told in the past. And ghosts are really just sort of interjections, is that a word, into our present. And so I think that is all combined. And so, of course, my love for history and storytelling and family connections and family history and ghosts, of course, that all comes into my future storytelling.
Yeah. I interviewed somebody a few weeks ago who was telling me she lived in a haunted house
So
while
jealous.
while she was writing her latest book, which happened to deal with an exorcism.
Oh, wow.
But,
Now that's a little scarier than just your regular run of the mill ghost.
yeah, a
Ouch.
little scoopy, little, spookier. We're not talking Patrick Swayze here.
Right, right.
It's more like Linda Blair.
Yeah. Mhm.
So when did you start writing? I mean, so you got to the reading game, you say late, third grade or so, kind of started with Nancy Drew, but when did you start thinking, hey, I might want to contribute something as a writer?
Never. I never planned to be a writer. It was just not something that I thought I could do. Um, uh, but I loved stories. I loved reading them. I loved thinking about them in my head. I remember my teachers all through elementary, middle, and high school, and even in college, because you had to take, I was a business major, but I had to take, the creative writing classes. And they were always saying, you should be a writer. You're very creative. And I'd be like, oh, but I know where that came from. It's, back in the day, and not to date myself, but, when I had to write an assignment, either an in-class assignment, a story, or whatever, it was all longhand.
Mhm.
And when you are a storyteller, your stories in your head are just, 10 times faster than you could write them down. And so I found writing very frustrating. I would get like an A+ in content and a D or F in handwriting, because I'd be trying to write that first sentence and my head would be on, the third chapter. And I just, I became the kid that would write really, really big, so that if it was a 5-page assignment, I just run out of space, And my teacher's like, well, how does it end? I'm like, well, I ran out of paper. So I, can't tell you the rest of the story, because I just found writing the most frustrating thing. Then in 10th grade, we had to learn typing, and we learned typing on manual typewriters. And that is the true tell of a true typist. So now I've played piano all my life, so I had really good hand-eye coordination. So I picked up typing very, very quickly on a manual. Within a week, I was typing 88 words a minute without mistakes. So there you go. And that's when it kind of clicked. But I had already told myself that there was no way I ever wanted to be a writer. I was just content to think of stories. Like, I'd be watching movies and I'd always come up with my own endings, or I'd read a book and if I didn't like the ending, I would just kind of think of it. I would never write it down, though, because, that's just not something I do. I didn't keep a journal. I didn't keep a diary. Remember, I have 3 brothers as well. And when my 2 older brothers and I went to the same high school, and that would have been social suicide. And there was no way that I was going to do that. I did keep a journal where I recorded what I wore to school each day, but that is all the personal writing I ever did.
I mean, if you looked at my report cards, and my mother has given them to me after they moved away, she gave me a box of my old report cards, straight U's, which stood for unsatisfactory in handwriting, straight through.
Same.
And I mean, to this day, I have to type because I can't write notes
No,
longhand, because I won't be able to read them. I will not be able to read them.
Yeah, and I apologize to people whose books I've signed, especially if they ask for more than just a signature. I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is my handwriting. I actually had a woman ask me after I signed my name. She looked at it and she said, "Is this really your signature?" No, I'm faking it on your, but yes, that is really my signature, and I apologize.
So, I mean, you've got 31 books out. So eventually you made the pivot to becoming, an author. But what were you studying in business school? Like, what was you when you were in college, finally sleeping alone? And I can't
Not
say the
much for
same.
my roommate's relief. Yeah, like get out of here.
I was gonna say you started sleeping alone in college. I started the other. But what I'm curious about is my dad's gonna hear this and be like, "What did I pay
Boy, I'll
for?"
be like, what? Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is like, what were you studying? What were you hoping to be when you were in college? If not an author, if not a writer, if not doing something creative, what was the plan?
Working in an office. I know that sounds so lame and stupid, but I had no idea. But I figured business, and my father, who paid for my education, figured business was a good way to start, So there were, and I thought, and I was exposed to so many really cool ideas of things I could do in the business world that didn't involve finance and accounting, which sadly I also had to take when I was in college. And I actually managed to pass them even. So then I started looking at advertising or marketing because those were more creative fields for me. And that's kind of what I was thinking about. Because really writing never occurred to me until after I had gotten married and I was expecting, no, I'd had, and then I had 2 children, boom, boom. And then I was like, okay, this is great. I don't want to work outside the home, but my kids are really good sleepers. And I just read this great book called Outlander by Dinah Gabaldon. And then I read the other 3 in the series. And when my kids were very little, I mean, I think my son has a dent in his head from me, nursing and propping the book up at the same time. No, I'm kidding. He doesn't have a dent, but the other 2 things are correct. And and I could not read another book after I put those books away. I couldn't. So I read them again and again. And I had the biggest book hangover. And that's when I heard the ghost of my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Anderson, telling me, "You should be a writer." And I was like, stay at home mom. My kids are on a good sleeping schedule. I have this time in the day that I'm right now reading. But what if since I can't read, why don't I just like sit down and just write my own book? And I did. That's what I did. I actually did. And that's the first book. I ended up sending it into a writing contest because Dinah Gabaldon would give you a written critique if you got to a certain level. So not only did I get to the level where I got a critique from her and she was fabulous, but I also ended up winning the contest. And that's how I got my first literary agent. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So that was your path to getting published.
Right. And I thought it was a fluke. And I thought the second contract was a fluke. It wasn't until my 12th book when I hit the New York Times that I thought, maybe this isn't a fluke. Maybe I'm supposed to be a writer. I mean, maybe because I'm a middle child and like nobody ever expected anything out of me. So I just I love surprising people, including myself.
Well, your 6th grade teacher was certainly onto something.
I know.
And then I'm curious, but you said the ghost of your 6th grade teacher. I mean, are we
Well,
talking like metaphorically here, or
metaphorically?
Okay.
I mean, because I can still hear her in my head, saying, "Karen, you should be a writer."
Well, I think there are those teachers, and they certainly don't get enough credit for all that we
yes.
become.
Yes.
But it's that usually that one voice, and I hear this over and over again, of encouragement of somebody who's not related to you that says,
Exactly.
you could do something like X, Y, and Z, or I spot something in you, and it's like that's that first, acknowledgement is so critical.
Right. Oh, absolutely. That you are not this crazy person who thinks that you can do this thing. Or for me, who's not this crazy person who just doesn't want to be a writer, regardless of, what your teacher sees as your talent. I'm also very stubborn. If I say I don't want to be a writer, I mean, I don't want to be a writer, and it took me years to get over that.
So I'm curious, what were you doing in business? Like after you graduate, what was the first job?
So I did work for an advertising company. Actually, I worked retail. I was in a retail management program. I wanted to be a buyer for this major, gorgeous department store in Washington, D.C. It was a chain called Garfinkel's. Lovely, lovely, lovely. They went bankrupt about the same time I got married. So that kind of worked out. And then I worked in an advertising company. And then right before my daughter was born, or for 3 years, I was an operations manager for a software design company.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, which was me, because operations manager, it's pretty much what you are as a writer. The writing part these days is this big, and then everything else is like this, and so I'm really good at managing. I mean, if you could see my desk right now, you'd scream, but because there's like so many different pieces, parts to the whole writing business. And so that job really prepared me for everything. And business school, I learned all about marketing. I learned about how to do a spreadsheet, although back then it was Lotus 1, 2, 3, but now I can do PowerPoint. It taught me not to be afraid of computers. And so it's all good. Everything has led me to this point.
Yeah, no, my first job out of school was in advertising, which I never planned to go into the business world. I was going to be a clinical psychologist, and
of course,
it's
kind of the same thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I was going to do a PhD program. Somebody said, take a year off, get a job, experience what life is like, outside of school. So I did. Never went back for the PhD, but that's how I got into the market research business and running focus groups and interviewing people for a living, and then that spun into writing and all that good stuff. But what were you with a big agency, or? I
wasn't. It was a small agency in Princeton, New Jersey, Ellen Tuck and Springer. I do not believe they are still in business. And it was the what are they called? The I can't even think of the name. It's the you remember back in the old days when it's 1-800 call, and those, so like TV Guide was one of our customers, and you know what I'm saying. There's
direct response marketing.
Thank you. Direct response. Thank you.
Well.
Yes, that was it. And we, the agency was one stop. It did everything, from, the client interface to the filming the commercials. And then I was on the business end, analyzing all the end of it and sending out. I mean, I remember putting tapes and, the tapes into the packages and shipping them out and all that to the different stations around the country.
Yeah. The old traffic department that no longer exists anymore.
Exactly. I was, again, I was on kind of an operation. Well, I was, a buyer's assistant and also in operations. So, it's a small agency. You do what you needed to do, but I loved it. I loved that job. And they also went out of business. Maybe it's me.
Yeah. You know what? I don't think so, because your publisher apparently still in business. Right?
Maybe they could through death, but not yet.
So you took you to the 12th book to have the light go on and say, maybe this is who I am. Maybe I can sort of identify as an author.
Right. I needed that validation, I guess, which is dumb. I don't want my children to be hearing this, because you shouldn't be looking for outsiders to validate what you do. But, writing is so subjective. And I'm like, what if I'm the only person and my editor, what if we're the only two people who enjoy what I'm writing, And then when you hit the New York Times list and just by word of mouth and people saying, I love this book, buy this book, read this book, it's really kind of cool. It's like, oh, okay. So other people like what I'm writing too. So yeah.
I think validation is just as important as that 6th grade teacher's, voice in your head saying, you should do this, you could do this. Because imposter syndrome, it's a real thing.
It is a real thing. I 100% agree. Mm-hmm.
I think if you look up the definition of imposter syndrome in the dictionary, my picture is going to be etched right next to it.
And I'm next to your picture. Totally. Yeah.
Well, we're in good company. So tell me about this new series. It's a spin-off series set in New Orleans. Tell me a little bit about the first book in the series.
Sure. So the first book is A Shop on Royal Street that comes out the 29th of March, which when we're recording today on the 28th. So tomorrow, yay. And so it is a spinoff of I'm going to say beloved, because everybody that I hear from says they love this series. So that means it's beloved, right? And those books consistently hit the New York Times, which is very gratifying. So the Trad Street series was set in Charleston, and it was, so there's 7 books. And when I got to writing the 6th book, I knew that the 7th book would be it. It was time to end the series, but I wasn't ready to say goodbye to those characters, or they're different from my single titles. There is the paranormal aspect. The main character in the Trad Street series is Melanie, and she is an OCD realtor who can communicate with the dead, and doesn't like to. So she sings ABBA really loudly when they bother her. So they're a lot lighter than my single title books, even though they do deal with the same themes in my other books, which is family connections, family stories, old houses, the things that I love. And so for when I knew that I wanted to end the series, I knew I wanted to do a spinoff series, and the most logical candidate of secondary characters in the first series was Nola Trenham, who is the stepdaughter of Melanie. And she's in the spinoff. So it's about almost 10 years after we last see her in the last book in the Trad Street series. And she's a young woman of 26. And she has had some stumbles in her growing up years, because when we leave her, she's just looking to go to college at Tulane in New Orleans. And so we meet her, she's 26. So she's past her undergraduate and graduate work. And she's working in New Orleans as an architectural historian, which, by the way, is my daughter's job. They have the same degree in historic preservation from the College of Charleston.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, for free research, anyone? But she's had some stumbles, and she's deliberately chosen New Orleans because she had some vices that obviously New Orleans would not be the place of choice for someone trying to avoid certain vices. And but that's her. She's very stubborn. She's very strong. And if you haven't read the series, you find out in the new series. And that's the one thing I need to make clear. You do not have to have read the Trad Street series to be able to jump into the shop on Royal Street to understand who Nola is, where she comes from, who her family is, that sort of thing. But she had a very rough upbringing for the first 14 years. And she did not make it into Melanie's family or life until she was 14. So there was those first 14 years were very formative, and we really don't understand the effect of those 14 years until we get into Nola's character in this new series, which I was so in love with, because I knew that Nola had a story that needed to come out, and this is my chance to do it. So she is a architectural historian for a civil engineering firm, like my daughter. And she is moving to New Orleans, and she wants to start off by buying her own house. And she can restore a house, right? She's got a degree. So she buys this completely dilapidated Creole cottage in the Marigny neighborhood of New Orleans. And we run into some people that Bo Ryan, who she met in Charleston and is not really fond of, who now lives in New Orleans, and who may or may not have the sixth sense, because of course Nola does not. And then we meet her old roommate from Tulane, Jolene, who is from Mississippi and is my favorite character next to Nola. But we also understand that when she tries to buy this house, Bo doesn't want her to buy it. And then we find out why. And then we also realize that there are 2 previous residents of the house, now deceased, who are unwilling to leave. So we get that paranormal thing in it that we had in the first series that people enjoyed, but we also have the family connections and the personal relationships of the leading characters. So yeah, a lot of humor put in. There will be a dog. I'm even adding a cat. So yeah, these are my fun stories to tell, and it's in the city of New Orleans, which is near and dear to my heart as a Tulane graduate.
I've never had a beignet, but I'm dying to have one from.
Oh my gosh. Just don't wear dark colors, because someone will blow powdered sugar all over you and you will be dusted with it. So,
we were talking about, the Trad Street series with the realtor, who's a medium and who sings ABBA songs out loud. You said ABBA, right? Mm-hmm. So that took me to when my kids were younger. I have triplets. They're about to turn 20, which is, it's freaking me out. They're turning 20 in like 2 weeks. My
daughter turns 30 on Wednesday.
Oh, geez.
I'm like freaked out. Yeah.
But like when they were younger, we would always listen to ABBA because I refused to do Raffi. And yeah,
Amen.
I will admit to being a big fan of the Wiggles, which you may have missed that because I
I
think that
did,
was, you
thankfully.
may have missed the Jeff Murray, Greg, and Anthony. But I can give you their colors too if you're interested.
No,
But
but thanks. Yeah.
but so we watched Mamma Mia, the Mamma Mia movies, a couple of years ago, and I found myself like tearing up. I mean, these are kind of funny, lighthearted movies, but I found myself tearing up just hearing all these ABBA songs, because thinking about these three little babies in the back of the minivan, singing along to like Dancing Queen and Fernando and all these great songs.
Well,
oh man.
And let me tell you now, so my kids, I wouldn't, they were like, we want to listen to our music, like their whole lives. I'm like, no, I'm the captain of the ship. And because I did carpool with 6 kids for the longest times, my 2 and then 4 others said, no, I'm the captain of the ship and we will listen to my music. And my music was 80s music. But can I tell you, my children thank me now, because when they were in college and even now, postgraduate, when there is a bar trivia, where there is going to be music trivia, they are always selected to come on the team because they know every 80s song.
Yeah, they're going to pick out Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Yes, come on, Eileen. Absolutely. They know them all, and they can name them from the first 2 bars. So you're welcome, kids. You're welcome.
Damn right. Damn right.
Damn right.
So along those lines, let's ask a couple of fun questions here. When you were younger, what were some of your favorite TV shows?
Oh, Dallas. Come on.
I'm so glad you said Dallas. I'm so glad you said Dallas, because it was one of those shows that was on, what was that on, like 11 o'clock maybe? It was late. It was on late.
I was living in London at the time. So you have to remember, like, I didn't watch kid television because we were in Venezuela and there was literally no television.
Yeah.
And then when we lived in London, we didn't get a lot of the American shows. Like I never saw Hill Street Blues or Saturday Night Live, none of that stuff until I went to college. So the shows that made it over there, Dallas, Dynasty, oh my gosh, Dynasty. And then Starsky and Hutch, because my little brother loved the cars, the car.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. That's what it was all about. It was the car with the Nike swoosh on the side.
Yes. Charlie's Angel, the Rockford Files. And
what all those have in common are fantastic theme songs.
Oh, absolutely. And when I went to college, my roommate and I, on Friday nights when the show was on, because we didn't always have dates, we would do our face masks and we said, let's go watch Don, meaning Don Johnson in Miami Vice. I love the theme song. They all had great theme songs. Yeah. Where did the great theme songs go? After Friends? No theme songs. No.
They don't have it. It's all cold opens and like nothing anymore. But Miami Vice.
I know.
Crockett and Tubbs, right?
Yes. Crockett and Tubbs. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I had white pants and mirrored shades, and I refused to wear socks for a period of time.
Yeah, it was a thing. Yeah.
No, but I like Dallas was one of those shows where I wasn't allowed. I was too young to watch it and really understand the themes.
Right.
But my parents used to let us watch the opening to it.
Okay.
So we got to hear the theme song, and then it was lights out, go to bed. I rewatched it. I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago. We started rewatching it, and holds up. It holds up.
Because I'm always afraid. Like there's so many of my favorite books that I read in high school that, I've tried to reread. I'm like, oh, this is so 80s. Like, no,
I mean, it is very 80s, it is. And I always thought, like when I was a kid, I'm like, J.R. Ewing, he must be the good guy. And he was like such a
good
scoundrel,
guy,
such a scoundrel.
Right. But see, it's so sad that nowadays, like in my books, if I want to, make a joke about, remember how it was a meme before memes were memes, who shot JR, and now kids today don't even know what that means. And that cuts me deep, because that was like huge part of my childhood or my, young adulthood, I guess.
I totally ripped off. I won't say ripped off. I was inspired by Who Shot JR, and I borrowed it with pride.
We all did.
Because I had the first thing I ever wrote was it was a spin-off of an 80s soap opera.
Okay.
And so I had so much fun with the nostalgia, and I had, Who Stabbed Kyle Dixon was the whole thing.
That's great.
And what happened to that actor after his career, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I thought that was the biggest thing. Who Shot JR? That and the opening of Al Capone's vault. Like those two things.
Right. Absolutely.
I remember.
And both
like
of them were like, ba-doom, boom. Like,
right. So non-issues.
So not issues, and then Bobby, it was all a dream.
It was all a dream. Oh, that was a shark jumping moment like you wouldn't believe.
It's like, I know, right?
That's lazy writing right there is what that is.
Absolutely. I could never get away with that. Oh my gosh. But
No.
yeah.
All right. So those are some TV shows. I'm probably going to know the answer to this next question, but let's imagine it's back in the 80s. You're listening to whatever you're listening to on your Walkman, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the cassette tapes we'd find?
Oh my gosh. Wang Chung. Loved him.
Everybody have fun tonight.
Yes. Tears for Fears. Love Tears for Fears.
They're touring this summer.
I know. They're so old.
I know, but they still sound great.
I know. So I didn't come to Tom Petty until like my middle 20s, I guess, but huge Tom Petty fan. Who else? I mean, of course, ABBA. Haircut 100. Do you remember Haircut 100?
I do not remember Haircut 100. I'm learning something right
now. Love Plus One is you when you hear the song, because you remember I lived in London, so I got the new age stuff a lot more and a lot earlier than in the States.
Yeah, by the time it got to us, it was old age.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But like everybody thought I was cool in college because I'd be like, a new song would come on the radio and I know all the words already because, I knew it already. And also Depeche Mode, Modern English. David Bowie, God rest his soul.
Oh, I know.
I mean, yeah, all of that.
He's a guy who could just reinvent himself with like every album.
No, absolutely. And he was so gifted. I listen to his stuff all the time, now that you can stream everything on your, I just listen to everything. But yeah, he is incredible. So yeah, just a little bit of everything. And like I said, even some Bee Gees. I mean, I love the Bee Gees.
I love the Bee Gees. I got into a whole argument with my wife because there were 4 brothers Gibb, but only 3 in the Bee Gees.
That's correct. Andy Gibb was never.
Andy Gibb, and we got into an argument, over dinner, and she's like,
Andy
Gibb. I'm like, Andy Gibb was not in the Bee Gees. She's like, yes, he was. I'm like, no, he was not. I've seen the behind the music 1,000 times, and it's not until she prayed to Our Lady of Wikipedia did she, come to understand the fallacy of her beliefs.
Yeah, and completely. And sadly, we lost him very, very young. And
we did.
Speaking of Pamela Ewing, he dated Victoria Principal. He was dating her when he died. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Look at that.
Oh, I'm the queen of trivial knowledge. Trust
me. I have to say, I love Tom Petty as well. I saw him right before he died. He was touring in the summer, and I think he passed away that October or so. But he played American Girl as his closing number. And I can't hear that song and not think of Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if you remember there was a scene in Silence of the Lambs where right before Buffalo Bill takes one of his victims, she's in a car listening to music. She's tapping on the steering wheel.
Song for me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Silence of the Lambs, loved it. But I don't remember. I'm going to have to watch it again. So
yeah, you watch it. Watch it and get sad.
And then I will never be able to listen to that song again. So
I will say this: we're hanging out in the parking lot a few hours before the show because that's what we do. And we look at our tickets and realize that there's an opening act, and the opening act for Tom Petty was Joe Walsh. And I lose my mind. I'm like, what are we still doing in this parking lot? Like, I'm a huge Eagles fan, but I love Joe Walsh too.
Yeah.
And so we sprinted. We got we missed like 3 Joe Walsh songs while we were just like.
Did he play All Night Long?
He did. I didn't hear him play that. He did play. He may have played it when we weren't when we were still having fun in the parking lot, but he did play Rocky Mountain Way, Funk 49. I don't think he played any Eagles songs. I think he strictly James Gang and Joe Walsh. Life's Been Good.
Yeah. God. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
All right. So third question. Obviously you've got a number of books under your belt, but how do you feel when you're staring either at a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen, about to start writing something? What kind of emotions are you feeling?
Oh gosh, like really, Karen? Like you have no idea what, again, that imposter syndrome just swoops in and settles on my, my chair next to me. It's like, what are you thinking? You don't know what you're doing. You're doing it all wrong. Maybe it's because the way I was raised, I don't know, but you would think after so many books, I would have a level of confidence going in that I have some sort of expertise. Nope. It's like every time, and it's not even each book, but every time I sit down to write, it's like opening up a vein, with a dull-edged blade. It's painful. It really is. And it never gets easier. But it's like, now I'm assuming you only have the triplets. You don't have any additional children after the triplets?
Two aging dogs. That's
okay. Okay. So I guess it's like the mother who has, given birth to triplets. It's like, I'm never doing that again. And then when the wound heals and the babies are cute and they're sleeping through the night or they're potty trained, you're like, gosh, that wasn't so bad. Maybe we should do it again, because look at the end result. The end result is so worth it. And you look at your bookshelf of these beautiful books with your name on the spine and you're like, but then you open up the dang computer and the blank screen is there and the cursor's blinking. You're like, what am I doing? So yeah, it's painful.
But I tell you, I mean, I have to imagine it's probably better to have that point of view than being overly confident, because if you're still, you're still trying to prove something to yourself, then I think that's better than kind of taking it for granted or even taking your readers for granted.
I agree. As a matter of fact, I can't remember where I read this, but I have a 93-year-old woman, one of my main characters in my book, The Night the Lights Went Out. She's one of my favorite characters ever. And she tells the younger heroine something like, those with an overabundance, God compensates those with an overabundance of confidence with, oh, great, I'm screwing it up, but whatever. But basically, or curses them with those with an overabundance of confidence with just a small amount of talent. Which is very true. I think those who are, and I guess because I was raised, by my father, who ended up being very successful in life, who had really, really humble beginnings, with no food to eat. Remember, 1932, Macomb, Mississippi. He was always about be humble. Don't, work hard and, success will come to you. Don't expect it. Yeah. And sometimes when you work hard, you won't get the success. You need to work harder, or just find something else that will bring you the success you were looking for. And I think that sticks with me. I still sometimes I'm like, oh, this is like, what? What am I writing? What am I doing? And then, I know better. I just keep going. And then when I go back to reread the chapter, I'm like, this is okay. This isn't bad. And it's sort of reassuring, unless my dog sneaks into my office at night and cleans it up for me before I look at it. But maybe I'm not such a failure.
Well, along those lines, it's a good segue into the next question, which is what lesson about publishing do you feel like you learned the hard way, if there is one?
Yeah, that once you make it to the top, you will not stay there. My career has been full of so many ups and downs. I'm car sick from it, It's like life, and sometimes you have to take a detour. Like right now, I'm taking just a brief hiatus. Normally I write my series books, and then I do sort of a more serious Southern fiction book. But I'm kind of having to delay that because, as we were talking a little bit before, my parents' care has landed on me.
Yeah.
And as you know, it's time consuming, it's heartbreaking, it's everything. And did I mention my daughter is getting married in October? So I've just got a lot going on in my life right now, and that's okay. And that's the thing I want to tell. Just if you get a no, that's not your final answer. I was dropped by my second publisher, and I thought my career was over. And then, but I had written a book, The Color of Light, that my agent really believed in. She said, "This is a great book. It'll find a good home. Just trust me." And it was hard for me to trust her. But she did. She placed it. And that's why I started with Penguin Random House, which really was the beginning of my career, even though I didn't start with them until my fifth book. Wow. So, it's like just, surround yourself with people who love you and support you. The people who are naysayers, you don't need them in your life. And it's easier for me to say now at this age than, 20 years ago when I started. Or was that 30 years ago? I don't know, 20 years ago. And and just, don't discouragement and no, and the answer no are temporary.
Yeah. Was there a time in your life where you were a little bit more concerned about sort of not staying on top? Were you more worried about it or stressed about it versus right now? Because it seems like you've almost come to terms with the fact that maybe nothing lasts forever in terms of kind of being at the top. But
absolutely. I think maybe within the last 5 years, and it's not, my career has been pretty steady, for the last, since really with Penguin. I started so small with Penguin. When my first contract was like grocery money, and so, but I love that. I love starting small and again, surprising myself. So it's been a nice and steady rise, and I'm very, very fortunate. But, seeing really dear friends of mine with fabulous books, it's all this. And I think also as you get older and you have some life challenges, as I'm going through, and you're also facing, everything is in perspective. I'm like, I've got a wonderful family, a wonderful husband, a sweet dog, 2 children who are doing well. We're all healthy. I'm still writing. I have a contract. I could have another contract soon if I can figure out what that book's going to be about. And I have ideas. I'm okay with waiting. I don't have to be like, I can't do that to myself mentally. Yeah. I think that comes with maturity too, just being on this world, in this earth longer. You just learn how to put things in perspectives. And COVID, I saw people die, husband of a dear friend of mine. And it just, she's a writer and, she's not able to write now. And I get it. I'm like, why would you? You need to deal with this horrible loss in your life and figure out what you're going to do next. And if the writing isn't there, it's not there.
You're talking, it almost sounded before like you were giving advice to, an aspiring author. So if you could pretend for a moment that there's an aspiring author listening to this, what would you want to tell that person? What kind of advice would you give?
To borrow from Nike, just do it. People, say, I need to get a degree in writing first, or I need to, take some classes, or, I need to have more time, or I need to, oh my gosh. If you want to write the book, or as Mrs. Anderson, my 6th grade teacher, used to say, where there's a will, there's a way. Absolutely. You get up. I know a mother of 4 who started, she's now a New York Times bestselling author, who started when her kids were little. And she would get up at 4:00 in the morning to write before she had to get up with the kids and then go do her full-time job. So where there's a will, there's a way. Do not picture anybody looking behind you. Write the story that you want to write. and then the rest will fall into place.
And if you could, I call this the Brad Paisley letter to me question because it's totally inspired by his song Letter to Me. But if you could write a letter to your younger self, mail it and have that, the younger Karen read it, what are some of the things that you would tell yourself from your adult self perspective? What would you tell your younger self?
Buy beachfront property.
Buy Apple in 81.
Yeah, buy honestly, don't sweat the small stuff. When I think of all the wasted time of worrying about things that do not matter in the long run, oh my gosh, like Susie got a better grade on that essay than I did. Oh my gosh, it's, my life is over. It's not important. It's not important. What is important is your family, following your heart. If you want to be a writer or whatever it is in your life that you want to do, follow that. Don't listen to the naysayers in your life or the naysayers in your own head. Believe in yourself, and yet, for God's sakes, don't sweat the small stuff. It's not worth it.
My father has that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And the subtitle is, and it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
Which, I think there is some truth to that. And I'm certainly guilty of overthinking just about every major and minor decision.
Me too. Hey, I've been trying to pack for 3 weeks for book tour, right? It's like, how many pairs of shoes, and I have like 40 pairs of shoes lined up. And my husband's like, you're only gone for 17 days. You don't need 40 pairs of shoes.
Little does he know.
Little does he know, right?
Yeah. Well, I went to Florida last week. I brought one pair of shoes and a pair of sneakers.
Well, you're a guy and you weren't doing any even now, like right now, I'm actually wearing fluffy socks. You can't see them, but when I'm on tour, I'm like on a stage and people see the whole outfit has to be there. And then you have to wear a different outfit every day because people's social media, they post it and you don't want to look like you're wearing the same thing every day.
I understand all that. Still, I always bemoan whenever we go anywhere. The weight of my wife's suitcase is always, 4X.
No.
Mine.
Plus my makeup carry-on. I mean, it's just out of control.
Sure.
But, there's a lot of effort that goes into it.
Absolutely. That's the things that we don't see, yet appreciate, perhaps subconsciously. Well, I know that the book is coming out as we record this. The book is coming out tomorrow. The Shop on Royal Street will be available wherever books are sold. But Karen, if people wanted to learn more about you, do you have websites? Do you have social medias that people can look up? Where would you advise people to go if they wanted to learn more about Karen White?
I would tell you to head to my website. First off, karen-white.com. There you can find everything you ever wanted to know about me and my books. Also, my social media handles are on the homepage. I'm really active on Instagram, and that would be at Karen White Write, Write.
There you go. Well, now you heard it from Karen. Follow her at all those places. Check out the website, and of course, check out the Shop on Royal Street, first book in a spinoff series set in New Orleans. Karen, thank you so much for this fun conversation.
Thank you. It's been a blast.